Hello, welcome back to Like Maria. Today I'm going to talk to you about quotations in An Inspector Calls, and I'm going to concentrate for the purpose of this video on Mr. Birling. So by the end of this video you'll be able to quote Like Maria. So first of all, I'm going to look at using stage directions, and these are really important in this play. Priestley spent a lot of time being quite prescriptive about how he wanted the stage set up. So it's really important that we use this information to inform ourselves about how characters develop. I'm looking at the initial stage direction to begin with concerning Mr. Birling himself. And he talks about how at the dinner party, Mr. Birling beams. And just remembering that one word, that he is at the dinner party and he is beaming at his family and feeling quite pleased with himself, as are the other guests. So that word beams is very important in conveying Mr. Birling's character. I think to take this analysis to another level, it would be a really good idea to look then at the end of the play. If you remember, Mr. Birling picks up the telephone, receives the information that a girl has died, puts down the telephone again. The stage description at that point is that he puts it down in a panic-stricken fashion. At that moment, he is panic-stricken. And I think a really good advanced piece of analysis is to compare this to him beaming at the dinner party. We have this progression through the play where Mr. Birling's demeanour changes, and from beaming and being self-satisfied, he is now panic-stricken and quite guilty and quite worried. Another stage direction, linking with this progression throughout the play, is that initially Priestley suggests that the lighting should be pink and intimate, a kind of warm glow, which fits in with Mr. Birling's beaming somewhat. But then when the inspector enters the scene, the lighting becomes brighter and harder. So I think that we can see there is a kind of pleasantness to a pink and intimate, lovely light, but when the outside comes in and impinges on the atmosphere, there is something bright and hard. The outside world brings a harshness and an investigation into the cosy setup which we witness at the beginning of the play. So there again we can see, and certainly Mr. Birling is resistant to this bright and harsh investigation and the brighter lights. He wants to stay in his bubble of pink and intimate coziness. Okay, so that's looking at stage directions. I'm going to move on now to look at how we might use just one tiny quote that we might have remembered. So remember that if in the heat of the exam you forget a quotation and you just remember something about it, you can still use that. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to use the quote, Mr. Birling refers to the Titanic as unsinkable, absolutely unsinkable. So if you're in the exam and you only remember that he said something about the Titanic and that he expressed confidence in the Titanic, don't worry about the other words, just talk about this. Now the first thing about the use of the Titanic is of course that we know when we see the play, and Priestley knew when he wrote the play, that the Titanic did in fact sink. So Mr. Birling's reference to the Titanic being an amazing ship and not being able to be sunk paints Mr. Birling as a rather foolish, ridiculous character, and we can have a chuckle at his expense there. But we do know that actually Priestley was doing more than this. He was using the Titanic as a symbol of a capitalist venture, something that people had put lots of money in, had ambition for, and a certain arrogance on the behalf of the builders who wanted to break the record and have the biggest ever ship and the fastest ever ship. So Mr. Birling himself says it had every luxury. And so we can see here that by reminding us about the Titanic, Priestley is going further than telling us that Mr. Birling is foolish to believe in these things, but that society itself is foolish to put all their eggs in one basket and have this capitalist attitude to luxury means success and wealth means success, and these ideas to the exclusion of other people and thinking about society as a whole. So if you can't remember the entire quote, you can still talk about these things and talk about the Titanic being a metaphor for capitalist society and a class-ridden society. Of course, we all know that in the Titanic there was a class structure that was maintained where the third-class passengers, so on, were kept below decks. If you can actually remember the quote, you can go even further still and talk about the actual syntax and the way Mr. Birling expresses this. He talks about the boat being unsinkable, absolutely unsinkable. And the repetition here of unsinkable increases our sense of humour towards Birling, because he actually repeats himself. And he uses that intensifier absolutely to increase the impact of that adjective. So that word absolute, meaning there is no question about it, makes Mr. Birling look even more farcical, because of course we know there was a question about it. So that repetition, the false confidence, is actually there in the syntax and the choice of expression that Priestley uses. So there we have two examples of quotations, one from stage directions, one from what a character actually says, that help us understand the character and the issues of the play. And I think it's a really good idea when you're going through your quotations, and in particular pertaining to characters, that you don't restrict yourself to the exact quotation, and you don't restrict yourself to just things that are said, but you interrogate those stage directions really carefully. So hopefully after this video you'll know how to do those quotations really well and be able to do that just like Maria.